So the main part of tonight's presentation is going to be Andy Collins talking about the paranormal investigation that we did in the building. But what we thought would be helpful is if you learned a little bit about this building, and at the same time we can kind of use that opportunity to cover some of the things that are going on right now that you might see around you. So I'm going to briefly cover that. We're not going to delve real deeply into the history of the building, but enough to let you know what's going on and what we expect. And I do want to thank Stan Kolazinski, who was our speaker last month, has prepared a list of articles and ads relative to this building that appeared in the Hampton Times. So if you want, we have some copies of that. We can pull those up, or you can pull those up and take a look at those. But what I wanted to briefly cover tonight is kind of the past, present, and future of this building. But since we're a historic association, we're going to start in the future and work our way back to the past. This hopefully looks familiar to you. It's the building that you saw when you walked in. If you happen to look, however, over here, you'll notice that is our old building and is now gone. Right?
Do you need the lights off, or should we keep them on?
I'll defer on that. Can you see okay, or should we get the lights off? You guys are good? Okay. Yeah. That was actually a rendering of the building that was done by Barrett, the architect, who kind of designed the space on this. And what the plan is for this building is to be the History Center of Whiting-Robertsdale. It will be home to a number of permanent rotating exhibits. And what I've found out since becoming a member of the Historic Society is we literally have tens of thousands of artifacts, photos, and documents in our collection. They're not all here because we couldn't fit them, and they certainly weren't next door. But we have a number of locations throughout the city, actually, that we will be bringing some things here and putting them on display, permanent displays as well as some rotating displays. The other thing that we're going to be housing here in the museum is an N-gauge model railroad, which if you look at this structure here, is where that's going to be developed. Dave Strickland is putting that together for us, and it's going to depict the history of Whiting as it would have appeared in the late 1800s. So we're looking forward to that being kind of one of the showpieces of our museum here. The signs from businesses, we've actually gotten those up already. If you look right behind you, with the assistance of the city of Whiting, we got those hung, and some of those might look familiar to you. And believe it or not, I'm old enough to have been to Fort Deuces, and certainly but those were certainly some of the things in our collection. We're proud to showcase those, and it'll be one of many things, or a few of many things that will be displayed here. The other thing that we're doing in this building here is the accession and curation work. I mentioned we have tens of thousands of items. Every item that comes into the Historic Society is kind of reviewed. It's the accession process. We computerize it. There are photos on the database, so we know what we have, and we know everything we have. That was a joke. So we have a good workspace in the back where we're able to do that. The other thing we want this building to be is a meeting place. Now we're keeping our fingers crossed that once we get our exhibits in, we still have room to put everybody here. But to make that also possible, we're hoping that with the city's cooperation, we also have an annex coming eventually in the empty space that is where the building used to be, the old building used to be. So that's all part of the future of what we hope to see in this building. In the meantime, we're going to be making as much use of it. As you can see, there's a lot of work, a lot of opportunities for volunteers too. So if you're interested, please let us know. We're a Historic Society, so we're going to consider this present. This is some of the work of what this building looked like just as late as February of last year. Rebecca, by the way, has done a wonderful series of videos that are on our website, and I would encourage you to tune into those to see how the progress has gone. All these are screen captures from that, so if you're interested in seeing more and getting a little narrated tour, please go to the website. So we've done the modernization that you would expect, and now we're working on building out the exhibit space. The building, of course, has a completely new facade and our workspace. So, getting back to the facade, again, from the architect's rendering, he modeled this after what was the earliest known picture of the building here. So as you can tell, there was an effort to really get back to this style as opposed to this and this, which is the way the building looked not that long ago. In fact, I think this is the facade that we removed to put the new one in. So we hope we gave it a good historic sense to kind of go along with the theme here. So this building was used for a number of things since its construction, which we think was about 1897, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Some of these businesses you may recognize, and some, this is not an exhaustive list, by the way. Stan's list here actually probably mentions a few businesses that are not on this timeline, but this is a timeline I think compiled by John and some earlier research that was done. So the building has quite a history of different activities over the years. Take special note of this picture and this, because we're going to come back briefly to that. Now, I mentioned the discrepancy. We believe this building was built in 1897. The assessor's records, the auditor's records all indicate that. These are what we call Sanborn fire maps here. And this one is from 1896. This building here is this, which became the Standard Hotel. And we are about right there. These yellow buildings are wood structure buildings. So we know the building here does not appear on the 1896 map, which it shouldn't if it was built in 1897. Also interesting that there is a building sitting literally in the middle of White Oak Avenue. If we go to 1901, we see the brick building here, and our neighbor's brick building here. This is still a wood structure in 1901. By the time we get to 1907, though, there we are. So we do know that this building shows up on the map in 1907. Now, the difference might simply be the lag in getting the maps published. The assessor, the auditor might have considered the date of construction 1897 because ground broke, so we don't know. But it's right in the time frame. Again, this is what became the Standard Hotel, the building on the corner, which you see is here, here, and here. And we are just over here. If you look closely at, I think, this picture here and this one here, you'll see our neighbors. And this building's kind of tucked in there. I can't quite see it, but it's there. And that's what 119th would have looked like back in the day. So that's kind of just a quick background of the building here. There are, though, when we were putting this together, there were kind of two curious footnotes about this building that we thought were worth mentioning. And the first is in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a tavern operating here called Nardi's. Late 60s, early 70s, it became the subject of an illegal gambling operation, which eventually was discovered by the government and kind of led to the prosecution of and jailing of several people. So it does have somewhat of an infamous past, that being the first one. The second one, I think, is really interesting. If any of you are familiar with Val Gunnis, who is the kind of first female serial killer from LaPorte, Indiana, and there's a great book by her called College Princess. But in short, Val owned a farm and was believed to have lured people to the farm with promise of marriage, would then drain them of their insurance and dispatch them. What they subsequently found was a number of bodies buried on her farm in LaPorte. And they always wondered what happened to Val. Well, the belief was that there was a kind of hired hand, Ray Lamphere, who they felt murdered Val, disposed of her in fire. They did discover, along with children, her body, except for the head. So there was never a definitive proof that it was her. But the supposition was that it indeed was. What they based that on was the discovery of a dental plate or some bridge work that included gold fillings and whatever, which when it was discovered was in pristine condition. But the authorities said, well, that proves it was her. When a doctor pointed out that if something was going to be hot enough to incinerate a skull, it certainly would not leave dental work in pristine condition. One of the experts that came up with that finding was Dr. Hilliard. And if you remember to our slide earlier, Dr. Hilliard actually practiced out of this building at one time. So we do have a connection to a rather infamous serial killer here. And with his finding, along with that of others, kind of led people to believe that Val Dennis was not, in fact, part of that fire, that she, in fact, fled. So on that kind of eerie note, I think it's a good time to introduce our featured speaker for tonight, and you can go ahead and switch over. And I'm going to introduce Andy Collins, who's also here on the board. And earlier this year, Andy kind of led a series of paranormal investigations of the building that we just talked about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy for the history and hauntings portion.
All right, well, thank you so much for that, Ron. Much appreciated. Let's give a round of applause. That's great. Okay, so as Ron was telling you, my name is Andy Collins, and I am a volunteer here with the Historical Society, and I am also on the board. Joining me here is J.C. Rositas. J.C. has been a very close friend of mine and was actually a mentor to me when I first started to get into the world of paranormal investigating. So you're going to hear me use the term paranormal investigating. You're going to hear me use the term ghost hunting. They are interchangeable. They're the exact same thing, but if you talk to a very serious paranormal investigator, you got to call it paranormal investigating. Don't know why it matters, but it does, nonetheless. But you'll hear me kind of switch in and out of those terms a little bit. I want to thank the Historical Society for allowing me to kind of do this and kind of give us this opportunity to have some fun. So this is obviously the spooky season, right? Halloween is a week from today. And this was all for fun. We didn't have any sort of reported reported activity in the location. And I kind of always like to make this joke that for a place to be haunted, there are certain qualifications. It has to have a murky history, a sordid history, the building has to be old, and then of course any occurrences must happen in the middle of the night. So that's kind of the criteria for any place to be haunted. But like I was telling you, we hadn't actually had any recordings of anything, of anybody seeing anything necessarily, maybe some strange feelings here and there, but nothing concrete. Nobody sat there and said, oh, I saw a ghost for sure. We just thought this would be a fun event, and again, with it just Halloween right around the corner, we organized a series of ghost hunts that actually happened in this building. So on one hand, we were genuinely curious if maybe there was something here. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because this building is a bit older. It's probably had a lot of, people come in and out of the doors, a lot of different characters like that. And Ron did some excellent research. Stan gave us some fantastic research. Thank you, Stan. And we are putting together the pieces to the story of this building and its history. We don't know everything yet, but we are getting there. Ron was telling me about the big digitization project that we have. That's going to fill in a lot of pieces. But again, truth be told, we don't know a lot about this building or its history. Nonetheless, we decided to have some fun and do some ghost hunts and investigations. And I have been kind of doing this, let's say give or take about 12 or 13 years. JC has been doing this, what do you think, 20?
Between 15 and 20.
15 and 20, so we had some good experience between the two of us, and then some of the attendees and guests that we had also had extensive experience. Sometimes that could have been as simple as going on like a walking tour, or it could have been actually going on a ghost hunt with JC and myself. But we did come at this with a little bit of an approach, and what we wanted to do more than anything was basically collect recordable data, capture digital media, personal experiences are huge, and then we wanted to put the time investment into this because we didn't want to just do one night and kind of, you know, put a bow on it. We wanted to do several nights, so we actually did 3 total. But the goal in all of this, of course, is to get evidence. Now, I can stand here and tell you that I felt something. I can tell you that I saw something. The problem is that a lot of that is just subjective because that's just the way that I saw it. That's what I felt. That's what I experienced. And I'll get to that in just a minute, but when we can actually capture something, whether that's with audio or photo, video, that is sort of honestly, that's the real thing that every ghost hunter wants to do. They kind of want to capture something so that way they can share it and show that ghosts are real. End of the day though, it's still going to be a pseudoscience. I would love to be able to sit here and tell you without hesitation that, oh yes, there are ghosts here and I can show you that proof, but in reality, even the proof I show you is still, again, going to be subjective. But when I go back to personal experiences, this was something that we really took into account and kind of kept track of. A lot of people, when we were doing these investigations, had some great experiences. And what we were trying to do was basically compare, okay, if somebody felt a change in the room temperature, did anybody else feel it? That type of thing is stuff that we look for, and that's kind of specific to temperature, but at the same time, we're also trying to find out if people are having experiences or feelings or premonitions even, if that correlates with anybody else that had the same sort of experience. So, the methods that we used, we kept track of the temperatures in the rooms. We did what's called EVP sessions. EVP stands for electronic voice phenomenon. And the way that that works is you find a location and you set up an audio recorder, and then you have someone lead an EVP session. Usually these last 15 to 20 minutes in there. And the idea is that one person leads it and they ask questions aloud. Anybody that's in the EVP session is free to jump in with a question. You know, we just wait for the break, try not to talk over one another. And the idea is that you are trying to ask questions that are going to prompt something paranormal to give you a response. You don't always, but when you're doing that, you don't always hear that response. Okay, a lot of times when you actually hear that evidence, it's way after the fact. It's when you're reviewing that audio or looking at that video clip or studying that photo. A lot of times it happens way after the fact. Not always, but probably majority of the time I would say it's sort of a post-mortem kind of evidence gathering. Now, when I say the word consultant, what we did was on the very first night, we actually brought in a special guest. We worked with a psychic who was actually local to the Whiting area. This gal came in and she basically, we let her walk all throughout the building. We didn't tell her anything about the building. We didn't tell her anything about the history of the building. We actually made sure to, frankly, we just didn't want to tell her anything. The reason why is because we wanted to see if any of her, what do we want to call it, feelings, connections, intuitions, that clairvoyant skill set that she was bringing into the building, we didn't want for her to have any sort of influence or anything like that. So we really stayed mum on the history of the building, and it helped too, because we don't know a lot about it. But we did have a psychic who did walked through here, and then after she kind of did her tour, she sat down and talked to us and told us a few things that were really fascinating, and I'll tell you a few things that she said. Responsive actions. So basically, when our psychic came through and told us what she was feeling, seeing, connecting with, that was actually how we started our EVP sessions. Because of some of the tips and clues that she was feeling, that was actually what led us to a few of the places that we did some of our audio recordings. Now, some other methods that we did was that in one of the locations where we were tipped off to where there might be some sort of activity or a stronger feeling that maybe something paranormal was in that wheelhouse, is we actually hung up streamers. Now these are just simple paper, nothing fancy, nothing special, taped up, very light, but this was done in the basement where there is no airflow. So what we were trying to do was keep an eye on these to see if they could move. Now, I'm not saying that this is a guarantee to find out if you have a ghost in your house. If you set up streamers and you just keep an eye on them all night, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt to try. It's hey, we're going crazy. We got something cool, But for the most part, the basement is, like better words, very stale. A little on the musty side, but we didn't actually notice anything with the streamers, but it was still one of those things that it's casting that wide net to see if there was anything that we might be able to experience or see. We also used what's called the spirit box. The spirit box is also known as a ghost box, and I'm going to try and explain what this is, but essentially it's a digital radio where the scan feature just keeps looping. And basically it scans through different radio frequencies, and the idea is that if you're encountering or meeting a paranormal entity, if you ask it questions, theoretically a ghost, a spirit, whatever you want to call it, might actually be able to use the electromagnetic energy to communicate with you through the spirit box. So, fun little gizmo, bit of a parlor trick, but at the same time, still a really cool item to have because it just adds to some of the fun that you have when you are doing your investigations. But the idea is that a ghost will try and communicate with you by getting the frequency to stop at random times, and then you record the words that are being said. These are radio stations and radio programs, but theoretically, you might actually be able to piece something together that is a form of communication from the other side. But this was just a really fun device that we really incorporated into our EVP sessions. And then we actually even took it a step further, and we did what's called the Estes method. So you can see this is actually Rebecca. You guys got to meet Rebecca. She is the one who has been overseeing our museum operation here. She's doing a fantastic job. This is Rebecca, though. She is in her basement. And you can see in the background, that's actually my buddy JC there. And what JC is doing is he actually has the spirit box plugged into a set of headphones that are going into noise-canceling headphones. And the idea is that JC could not hear anything that we were asking during our EVP session. Instead, JC was on the far end of the room, and basically whenever he heard anything that sounded, that was very clear coming out of the spirit box, he shouted it out. So he could not actually hear anything that we were saying. And I'm going to tell you, you guys kind of heard how this thing was going through it. When you got that in your ears, like that's all you hear. Really screams your eggs, but
very desensitizing.
Yes, yes. So that was another method that we used when looking for evidence. We also did some time-lapse photography. So I used a trail cam and set it to take a photo once every 10 seconds. Now, I did not do this all throughout the night. I just did this during our EVP sessions. But in doing this, basically, I was able to capture images. No lights were on whatsoever. It was very, very dark down there. But having the time-lapse photography was just absolutely phenomenal. I used a trail cam. If anybody's familiar with trail cams, that's what they're built for. They're built to do time-lapse photo. They're built to do motion capture. But the idea is shooting in environments where the lighting is exceptionally low. So we incorporated that just to see if, hey, maybe this could capture something too. Like I said, just casting a very wide net to see if we might be able to gather some evidence. Now, this was an item, a singing bowl. This is one that was actually brand new to me. I had never seen this done before. So I'm gonna, you wanna give it a try?
Yeah, give it a try.
All right, JC's gonna explain this. He will do it a lot better justice than I will, so.
So the idea with the singing bowl, it is just one of the many devices that can be used during paranormal investigation to try to get some type of, elicit some type of response. The idea is to, if you guys are familiar with like Tibetan singing bowl, is really what it is. You have your pestle there, and this bowl is made of a certain type of metal that when you take that and you rub that along the edge, it emits a certain frequency. Now, we didn't try this in all 3 nights, we did it just on the 3rd night. That's when it became available to us. But we decided to give it a shot anyway. So what this does is that this will allow a frequency to be generated that as you're doing your recording onto your recording device, that the hope is that whatever's trying to communicate with you will be able to use that frequency and be able to speak through that, and you would capture that onto your recording device. So in short, that's what the singing bowl is used for. It's not commonly used in a lot of things. So just by a quick show of hands, does anybody watch the ghost TV shows or maybe have in the past sometime? Don't be ashamed. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Okay, so some of us, okay. So you probably have not seen this on any of the TV shows. A lot of investigators have their own methodologies in the way that they approach things. And with this one, it's very unique in the way that it's done. And I'm really glad we brought the investigator who we had with us that night because she has many, many more years of experience in doing this than I did, and she just thought this would be a great idea to bring this in to try it out. Fortunately, we did not really capture anything through that, but it was still a great device to bring into the fold of things.
Actually.
Oh, okay.
Dowsing rods.
One more. If you guys aren't tired of hearing me talk. So the dowsing rods, this is one that I'm sure that maybe a lot of people may have heard at some point in their lives that you remember that like many years ago, people were looking for water, they would use rods to try to point them into the direction of where that water source would be. This is pretty much what that is. It's 2 pieces of copper that are fitted into like a dowel. So they sit nice and neat and they kind of spin on their own. The idea is you hold them, you kind of tilt them down a little bit, and you would ask pretty much yes and no questions to get a response. Yes would mean that the rods would cross, and no would be that when they would uncross. What was interesting in this particular night when we tried to do this is that, as we see in the picture here, one of our investigators, Frank, was using them. We actually had another person who used them as well. They both had the same outcome, where the rods would cross, but they would not uncross. They kept crossing. The other investigator was actually being led into a certain area down in the basement that was behind an area that we had suspicion that maybe that's where some activity was happening. And they kept leading her behind this room. So we don't know what that meant exactly. But it was a very interesting finding that happened with that. Now, give or take, a lot of the devices, in fact, probably almost all of the devices that are used by paranormal investigators is like, is this real? Does this really work? How can you really, tell if this is being manipulated by the user or not? Almost everything can be, I admit that. But there has to be, from an investigator standpoint, there has to be at least some open-mindedness to trying something that's new. For me, I've never really used these before, but I'm open to that. And we tried it that night. We had that interesting response that came from those, where it was leading one of our investigators to one area of the basement that has some significance to what we've been recording as far as the data, but it was still having the same kind of response even with a second user, where it just was not responding the way we wanted it to. So all in all, it was very interesting, to say the least.
So, like I was telling you, we had to figure out where the ghost at. So, the psychic came in, did a walkthrough, and she felt connections to several different areas, but there were two things in particular that she really felt drawn to. First up, that sign right there, the Standard Oil product sign. For whatever reason, our psychic actually felt a very strong connection to that sign. And that is one of the first places that we actually started when we were doing our EVPs. And as I was telling you before, we hadn't had anybody who said, oh yeah, I saw a ghost over there. Oh yeah, I heard something here. We had to find a place to start. So it made a lot of sense for our special guest and this gift that she has and utilizing that. And so this was actually the first place that we started, was right in here. We kind of huddled up in this area and we did our first EVP session in that area. And then the second location took us down into the basement. So as you can see, this basement is, you gotta watch out or you're gonna hit your head. Old basement, musty. We have a lot of our stuff down there that we're storing. In the basement, there was a room all the way, if you're walking all the way down and to the left, it's just basically an old storage room. But we did an EVP session in here. The psychic did not actually point us to this room. We were just down there, so we thought, let's go ahead and utilize this room. But the psychic did point us to the cold storage room. So this room is good and creepy, as you can see. We do not utilize it for our produce, but it will be used one day as basically just a general storage room kind of closet. But that was one of the locations that not only did our psychic feel extremely a very strong connection to this room, we had various people throughout the night who had joined us for the investigation. They all had, several people had feelings, connections, change in mood. Basically, there was a reaction to this room. Now, something else that we did that we didn't really tell our attendees about on the night that we were doing this is that one of our guests, not the psychic that we had invited, but one of our guests actually had, let's say, you could say that she's clairvoyant. She doesn't like to call herself a psychic, but she says that she is in tune, that she has a connection to some of this paranormal, supernatural, otherworldly stuff. And this guest in particular, when she saw this room, right away she said, I don't want to go in there. I don't want anything to do with that room. Later on, she actually was very brave and actually ventured inside of it for just a couple of minutes, but in particular, she felt a very strong sort of connection. She felt a strong feeling about this room and something in particular. We had another gentleman who joined us, he couldn't be here tonight, but he was the brave soul who actually sat in this room with the lights off while we were doing our EVP, having the audio recorder going, and he himself felt a number of, let's just say, mood fluctuations. He said that it was 1 minute he would feel sad and depressed, and then the next he would kind of level out, and then the next it would just go downhill. So these were the locations that we predominantly looked into, our cold storage room, and then of course our Standard Oil product sign. A couple of facts about the nights. We did 3 nights of investigations. We had 16 people attend. That 16 people was stretched across 3 nights. We didn't have 16 people there each night. It was just a total of 16 attended. We did do, coincidentally, 16 EVP sessions. 3 hours, 30 minutes of audio recorded, 536 photos taken. I forgot to put it in there, but I got about 2 hours worth of video clips. So now when it comes to the audio and the photos and the videos, this is the thing that a good paranormal investigator will do. You sit there, you listen, you watch, you look. Everything. Right? Because there's no telling when, where, or how you could get any sort of evidence, so you pretty much gotta review it all, and you have to do it in depth. It can be a very mind-numbing process to do, because there's a lot of blank space on these recordings, but at the same time, you're trying to listen for anything that could be there. Or the same thing with the photos. Again, we were doing time-lapse photography, 1 photo every 10 seconds, so that will get you, a lot of photos. But now going into some of the findings. Now, like I told you, this is it's a pseudoscience, okay? It is not a concrete, accepted thing in the scientific community. So again, we had to go off of a lot of personal experiences, see what was shared, see what people were feeling. So, we had numerous fluctuations in people having, going from comfortable to warm. A couple of people even got cold. Several attendees noted an odor and a color, right? So, we had a handful of people who noted a smell, a very floral, perfume sort of smell, something very flowery. Lavender was a word that came up, but we had 4 or 5 people that actually noted this smell at different points in the night. And then the color purple actually came up several times. Several of our guests were experiencing and seeing things in different shades of purple. Closing their eyes during the EVP sessions, just randomly blinking, things like that, they were reporting seeing and experiencing the color purple. Our special guest, again, that was our psychic, noted artifacts in this building and also saw a shadow move into a room. So, when the psychic was walking through the basement, she saw a shadow at a distance move across the room and go into the cold storage room that's down there. In addition to it, she also started getting premonitions about weddings, matrimony, people getting married. We've heard some stories kind of passed down that there might have actually been marriages that were done in this building. She was not aware of any of that. She didn't know any of that. But the real kicker to this was that we actually had 2 antique wedding dresses that were not on the floor or anything like that. They were actually stored in the back room. In fact, I want to say it was up on the second floor in the apartment. So to give you a bit of an idea, we are in our main exhibit room here. You have the office space back there, but there is actually another building that's attached to this that it's got an apartment that you can actually go up into. We actually kept 2 antique wedding dresses in there. She had no prior knowledge of any of that being in this building. So again, I can't sit here and tell you like, ghosts, psychics, it's all real. I can't do that, but I can tell you that that is a very fun coincidence and a very fun little fact that we found. Basement lights flickered while we were down there on several different occasions. Now, this one, I felt like it was important to note because that's what we look for. We look for anything abnormal, right? That's what we want to keep track of. But again, this building, a little old, so lights flickering, that could be just about anything. But I will tell you this, on the 3rd night, myself and JC got here with another one of our investigators, and we were here about an hour before anybody got here. We took the new guest and showed her around the building, kind of what we were going to be working with, and the 3 of us went into the basement. Front door was locked, back door was locked. The 3 of us went down there, and the next thing we knew, we heard footsteps up here. Somebody walking around. Not gonna lie, footsteps are pretty unmistakable. So when all 3 of us heard it, clear as day, JC came back upstairs and took a look around, and nobody was up here. So again, not going to say that that is irrefutable evidence or irrefutable proof, because that is just basically 3 people hearing what we thought were footsteps when no one was around. But again, that's sort of that personal experience in correlation that we look for, is when people have those shared experiences. During the EVP, we had an attendee who felt that somebody was actually standing behind them. They felt that a presence of sorts was actually standing behind them. We had another attendee who felt depression as the night commenced. Several attendees felt uncomfortable immediately, and especially strong feelings of discomfort near the cold storage. Estes method. Like I said, you put the headphones on and you stand at a distance, and we had 2 things that came up in that. The first one was the mention of someone, basically it said blank is going to die. Kind of a weird thing to hear on the radio, and why it stopped on that we don't know, but it was just a fascinating thing to hear. The second comment, which I'm not actually going to elaborate on, I'm just going to tell you, had to do with sexual assault. It was a very strange comment that came through, but the person who actually had the headphones on said he heard it clear as day, and that it was a very unnerving comment that he heard. We decided to actually not share that with the other attendees that night, just because we wanted to kind of get our minds clear on this and kind of figure out, to make sure what was going on and what we were hearing. But with some of the uncomfortable feelings that were happening near the cold storage room, just a very fascinating thing to find out. And then of course, the dowsing rods led us behind the cold storage room. Now, these are all shared experiences. These are things that we witnessed, and of course, all we can do is tell you this is what we experienced. But we do have 2 recordings that we're going to play for you. These are audio recordings that were captured when we were doing some of our EVP sessions. So give us just 1 minute, and we're going to cue these up.
So before I run these EVP here for you, just to kind of give you a little bit of an insight into this, as we mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for between 15 and 20 years. Of all the evidence of anything I've ever gathered, what I can say is that all the thousands of pictures I've taken, and all of the thousands and thousands of hours of video that I've ever captured, I have maybe 5 good pictures that would make me question what I captured on my camera. Not a whole lot in video. But if you can ask any investigator this, no matter where they go, what they do, they'll always tell you, EVP is where it's at. Because you can capture something that's some kind of voice that's straying through that you don't hear at the time you're recording it. And a lot of times you get that and maybe an answer to something you can ask. Having said that, what we have to appreciate is that at times when we're doing these things, and we ask questions, and if there is something there may be a pause, there may be a little bit of a lag in between when the question is asked and when the answer is given. And the thought, the theory behind that is that whatever's there has to manifest the energy to be able to respond. So when we do these things, we do try to pace these questions out and give it enough gap of time to be able to get an answer. And I'm bringing this up because in this first one I'm about to play for you, you're going to hear a question being asked, and then you're going to hear almost 20 seconds of a pause, and then you're going to hear another voice that doesn't fit in. Right after that, you'll hear me asking the question. And I only asked that question because we didn't hear that voice in between these 2 questions. You guys ready? Sure.
Did you get into any trouble while you were drinking, or maybe playing some cards here? What was your status here in Whiting? Are you a political figure?
Does anybody want to hear it again? I see some nods. Okay. All right, tell you what, I'll bring it just before we hear that voice, that's all right. Okay. Give it about 8 seconds before it plays.
What was your status here in Whiting? Are you a political figure?
We didn't hear that at the time when we were doing this recording. There were a lot of witnesses that were here. They can probably attest to that as well. So it is just one of those strange phenomena that happened, but it does happen. Oh, I apologize. Thank you for asking that. That actually was here in this room when we were doing the EVP session by the Standard Oil Products Center.
What did he say?
The best that I can figure out what they say is that when they questioned, the first question was asked about, if they got in trouble for drinking or doing whatever, that it sounded like they were saying bigger. Like maybe they did something more.
And what was the second question?
The second question was the one that I asked after that, if they were like a political figure here in Whiting.
And what did he say to that?
We didn't get an answer to that.
Oh, you didn't get an
No.
answer to the political figure.
We didn't get an answer to that. Now the next one that I will play, this was a session we did following that, and we talked about the wedding dresses. So there was a question that was asked by one of our other participants here. I think it might have been you, John. But as he was asked at the back end of his question, I'll play it, but I'll let you tell me what you think it is. I know what I think it is, but I can't really say for sure. But it comes in just underneath the question that's being asked.
The dress is very nice. Who made it?
You hear that little bit of a squealing kind of voice at the end of that? Just before that, what I thought I heard was sound like it was a female chuckling. I'll play it again.
Question?
What was the question that was
What's the
asked?
question?
I don't recall. Let me see.
The dress is very nice. Who made it?
Your dress is very nice. Who made it?
Okay,
And then there was a noise after, like a giggling or something.
okay.
I'll play it one more time.
The dress is very nice. Who made it?
Sounds like a kid.
It did. It kind of sounded a little bit like a kid. I really couldn't tell it was a kid or maybe female, but it was definitely wasn't male. But these were the two findings that we had from that night. And I will submit to say that when you do these investigations, I can't tell you how many times I've visited places and gone places. I've traveled around quite a bit throughout the state of Indiana, Illinois, I've been to Ohio, been blessed to go to Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, a lot of different places, a lot of different states. And a lot of times, I walk away with nothing. A lot of places that you see in these TV shows that say those things going on, you go there and I can't tell you how much more fun it is to watch the paint dry on the wall than it is anything else. But you do get those nights, once in a while, where things may happen. Even when you walk away with something like we have here, it's still, to me, that's worth all the weight in gold.
Thank you, JC. So, I would love to have nothing more than some amazing photos or video clips of a full-bodied apparition, flying around, learning history. But what we got is what we got, and then it's the breaks. You do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you hope that you get anything even close to that. As JC was saying, he's been to several different locations and only has a handful of things that he feels are worthy of further investigation. I have done not nearly as many locations as him, and I would say I've probably had only 2 or 3 experiences, not counting those. I've only had 2 or 3 experiences where I'm like, I can't explain that. And, or I don't think that there's, some sort of rational explanation. But nonetheless, is this building haunted? I really don't know. It's kind of open-ended. If you want it to be haunted, it can be. If you don't want it to be, it doesn't have to be. But if you want to have that open mind and think, hey, maybe it is, and maybe it's worth investigating more and looking into, then that's honestly the best way to be. I mean, a little bit of a mix of skepticism along with open-mindedness. So